for another session with Virgil Systems, and we have a special guest here, Yaron Vorona, and he will be talking to us about his startup. For those of you that haven't registered yet, don't forget to go and register for the Blockchain UNconference. Remember, it's on October 14th from 9 to 1:30 p.m. Just go to washingtontechnology.org, look under events, Blockchain UNconference, and register. Hey, Yaron, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ari. How are you?
Great. Give us a quick background on yourself and Virgil Systems. What's the background story?
Yeah, sure. So my background story is a little bit strange. I've always wanted to be a technology business person. So I studied physics and business for my undergrad. I worked in technology manufacturing for a few years and then quit to travel around the world and did some consulting in technology in Thailand, in China for half a year, went on to England to do a master's and MBA in entrepreneurial finance. And since graduating there over a decade ago, I've been working exclusively with high-tech startups doing finance and strategy. I also was an entrepreneur in residence at a DC-based think tank focused on energy and security policy. And while there, I fell down a cybersecurity rabbit hole. So I founded my first company, which did not go so well. We closed that up at the end of 2018, and then joined the founding team at Virgil Systems to do what we're doing now. And kind of the background of Virgil Systems is really unique. The concept for the company originated with Wendy Joy Majumdar and Yaron Majumdar. Yaron is a serial entrepreneur and technologist as well. He's got patents in quantum computing and AI and cryptography. So he's like a real kind of mad scientist, technologist kind of guy. And he spent a good portion of his career assisting governments, both the US and Canada, with key cyber defense strategies. And his prior venture included the Pentagon and Fortune 100 enterprises among its core customer base. So he's intimately aware of the security needs and vulnerabilities in government and enterprise networks. Meanwhile, Wendy Joy spent over 20 years engineering very large systems, software systems for the US Navy. And so she really understands how to build for scale as well. And they brought the rest of the founding team to complement them. We've got Gov, who's our mad coder and with significant distributed computing skills, Herman, who has an incisive and legal analytical mind, and myself with nearly 15 years of global experience in technology and entrepreneurship strategy. So together we took Yaron's intellectual property and created Virgil Systems to address what we feel is one of the biggest problems on the planet.
Well then, what is the problem that your company is solving? And like, why is this the biggest problem that you saw? Like, how big is this problem?
Yeah, so, I mean, to think about the problem of what we see as relying on data for our daily lives, we can think back of the internet as it was structured in kind of the late 70s, early 80s of last century. It's remained largely unchanged, with the exception that bandwidth has increased, the amount of content has increased, data consumption have increased, all exponentially. And for years, data connectivity has been a crucial part of business operations and communications. And today we've reached the point where so much depends on the trustworthiness of data. We've got trillions of dollars in financial transactions going on. We've got lives hanging in the balance, both in operating rooms and in the streets at home and abroad, as our service members, both in emergency services or the armed services, are working hard to keep us safe. We've got artificial intelligence engines making decisions over transportation and over our daily life. And so I think it's fair to say that reliable data is the most precious commodity in the world today. And yet, if we look at the cybersecurity industry, it's one of the most frothy industries. That's why my last company didn't succeed, was there were so many players in the market because everybody's trying to solve the problem of how do you create, how do you use computers in a way that you can trust? And the answer is you can't. You can't be assured that the networks you're transiting are trusted, that the data, whether it's financial transaction data, whether it's medical data, hasn't been tampered with. And the Air Force calls this kind of the key activities that adversaries use to affect data transmissions as the D5. There's the denial of access, there's deception, there's delay, there's degradation, and then there's the destruction of data. So we know that there are bad guys in the network. We know that they're doing evil things. And then on top of that, we're starting to adopt miniaturized technologies where, you know, EM radiation or solar flares can cause bits to flip. And the difference between a 1 and a 0 on something small is significant. Or with 5G technologies or even 4G technologies where we've got very, very high frequency signals that can be attenuated by buildings or radio interference, or for our armed forces in the battlefield, electronic warfare and radio jamming. And so it's in this environment that we have to think about, you know, how do we trust the data that we live our lives based on? And so long story short, the problem that we're solving at Virgil System is the problem of allowing people to be connected to each other with trust. And the size of the problem, well, it's immeasurable.
Whoa, my mind is going, wow, okay, so very big problem. And you guys have a lot of the smartest people I've ever heard of working on it. So then how does blockchain fit into this solution and solve this problem? And why blockchain? Like, why didn't you go to a different technology or, yeah?
Yeah, so I love telling this story about blockchain. You know, I taught a blockchain course at a college in Canada last year, and I started it off with, you know, you can take artificial intelligence, add it to anything, and you've got something useful. Might be silly, but could be useful. You know, an AI-powered pen, you maybe can correct your spelling or improve your handwriting, or do recognition and digitization. An AI-powered chair could, you know, tell you how you're eating and how your posture is. But you can't do that with blockchain. Blockchain needs to be used in, you know, a very, very specific, intentional way, and only in limited use cases. So for us, blockchain, and I use that term very loosely because we're less focused on a cryptographically signed series of transactions in a chain of blocks, as we are in the power of distributed ledger technology in general. And that just forms a basis of some of our technology. So how our solution works from a technology perspective at a high level, let's say you've got Alice and you've got Bob, who are pretty much the most popular people on the internet. And Alice wants to send Bob some data, and they both want to know that nobody has altered that data or that nothing has affected that data. Those D5 effects that I spoke about earlier. And so what our system does, Alice's node takes the data that she's going to send, whether it's a picture or a stream of video or a document or a critical software update. That data, whatever it happens to be, we're agnostic to the kind of data, is broken it up into pieces, and each piece is combined with its own hash. And then additional data is mixed in using some data transformation techniques inspired by quantum information technology. And we create what's known as a data hologram. And these holograms are then compressed and secured against eavesdropping. And now these tokenized data holograms are ready to send. And all of that happens nearly instantly in a middleware solution that has a very, very lightweight, small footprint. So Alice's node will go out and search the network for available other hosts that can host and store these tokenized data holograms. And at the same time, she creates a smart contract consisting of the order of randomly distributed tokenized holograms that we call a cryptographic receipt. And it serves as a map essentially for Bob's node to go out and find and reassemble all of those tokenized holograms. That receipt is transmitted to Bob in a specially secured channel. And now Bob's node can use that to gather and reassemble the scattered tokenized holograms on his side. Now, the outcome of this technology is that the data has its integrity and availability assured. Even if 80% of the data is destroyed or altered or delayed in transmission, we can not only verify that the data he receives is integrity, but from the 20% that hasn't been affected, we can actually restore the original piece of data. So from a catastrophic loss, from massive network outages, by breaking up the data into small pieces, spreading it out and gathering it back together, we're able to assure that data integrity happens. And that's crucial for us to know that the data that we're receiving hasn't been tampered with.
So is it sort of like torrent back in 1997 when you were sending MP3 files? It took like forever to like today when we're using Spotify and you have all this music at the tip of your fingertips, something like that?
Yeah, so torrent is a great example of a very early use case of the distributed storage technology. And there are some players in the blockchain ecosystem who are doing some interesting things. You know, popping into mind are things like SIA or IPFS at Protocol Labs, the Interplanetary File System. You know, our lead developer recently played around in a great IPFS hackathon, helping them to think through some of these issues. But ultimately, those are good for kind of low uses, high latency, slow transfers. And again, you can't always be sure that what you're receiving is trusted unless you do a hash check, right? The hash is the digital fingerprint of the data. And if I look at that digital fingerprint and I look at the data and they match, then great. And if they don't, then I need to go out and retransmit. And that retransmit takes up time. It takes up crucial time, especially if you're thinking about mission critical use cases, whether it's a financial transaction that, you know, milliseconds matter. At the same time, you know, milliseconds matter when you're talking about military operations or sending police to a crime scene, or ambulance drivers and fire trucks to a chemical plant. All of this matters. And you don't have the time to retransmit. And so for those use cases, you really want something where you're able to deliver the quality and the speed that you need in order to make informed decisions.
Okay, so the use cases that you're talking about are very much like the community infrastructure of how, you know, we live in our communities and work together and keep each other safe. Maybe even why we pay taxes, right? So then for you and Virgil Systems, what are the industries that are most relevant for your technology, and what is the industry that you're most focused on today?
Yeah, so I would say that we are definitely interested in trying to have the biggest impact we can. As a company mission, we're really focused on creating prosperity in the world. And we use the word prosperity in its fullest sense, not just financial wealth, but health, well-being, full self-expression. And in order to achieve that mission of prosperity, we're focusing on the areas where we can have the most impact. So first and foremost, you know, helping to solve the problems of data integrity between different government agencies and to keep service members safe. Critical infrastructure where, you know, attacks proliferate, where nation states around the world not just focus on trying to attack people in the United States and Canada, but globally, we want to make sure that people are safe and able to live their lives in a safe way. And then beyond that, we're very actively working with the telecommunications industry, whether it's, you know, through initiatives like the WTIA Accelerator, or by our involvement in Encore in Canada, which is a 5G test bed that is a collaboration between the Canadian government, the governments of the provinces of Ontario and Quebec, and large corporations like Sienna, Ericsson, Thales, amongst others. And we're seeing how our technology really impacts the quality of service and trustworthiness of 5G technologies as it comes forward. And so those are kind of the three core focuses for us: our government and defense, our critical infrastructure, and our telecommunications infrastructure, so that we can be sure that the world is communicating in a way that they can trust.
Before I go and ask about the long-term future roadmap for the company, Another question around COVID. So the coronavirus has obviously impacted the world quite a bit.
Yeah.
How has it impacted your company, or has it not impacted your company? Like, has anything changed, and what has changed?
Yeah, so I think we're a really interesting case in that while it has made holding business meetings a little bit slower, especially at the start, as we start to interface with executives in business and government, it was a little bit of a bumpy start, but we were really well positioned off the start. We've already got a distributed team where some of our executive team already is based in the DC area. We've got a lot of development in Toronto. Our head of engineering sits in Ottawa. We've got some fantastic DevOps work happening in the Bay Area. So we've already got a distributed team. And we did that intentionally so that we can have a really diverse and effective workforce. We're attracting talent from around the world who are helping us to solve this problem. Meanwhile, from an opportunity perspective, I think that it's really emphasized the need for a solid network of trust and trusted communications. We all live now in a world where we're telecommuting. You and I are not sitting on a stage in a fireside chat. We're sitting on Zoom, and we have to trust the communication between us is going to remain stable. And so it's really highlighted the importance of data networking. And so that's been a really important experience for us.
That's really, really interesting, and so amazing that you started off as a decentralized team. So it was very, very, very cool. So then in terms of the long-term future roadmap for the company, where are you going now? The next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we are, I really like the idea that there are investors who will invest in what they hope will be unicorns, which are fictional characters that appear one day and are worth $1 billion. Well, for us, we're building from an organizational structure and from a technology structure more of, I guess the industry calls it a camel or a cockroach. It's something that will stick around forever and become a crucial part of the ecosystem. So the long-term roadmap and our technology has been designed in a way that not only addresses some of the core considerations around 5G technology, like the higher frequency and the greater signal attenuation, and dealing with some of the things like miniaturization and the tendency for bit flips and data errors. But we have our vision really on a long-term roadmap. And so the fact that we use quantum information theoretical transformations on the data really positions us for 6G technologies and quantum communications and quantum computing. And by tying in other things like our expertise around machine learning, we're able to build a system that is not only resilient, but becomes anti-fragile. Now, if we think about Nassim Taleb's book on anti-fragility, what we know is that an anti-fragile system actually becomes stronger the more stressor it experiences. So we not only create a network that can withstand and be resilient to attacks, but we create a network where the data is more secure if it becomes attacked. And so looking beyond 5G and 6G and quantum computing, we have this amazing roadmap of things that we'll then be able to build on top of our underlying technology. Because we're using a basis in distributed ledgers, we can then start in the future to program in things like automated data asset transformations. If you over the Virgil Integrity Network have signaled that you're sending funds, then we can then allow the cryptographic receipt to enable you to access a certain amount of content for a certain period of time or a certain number of times before your access disappears. So there's some really interesting things we can do around data provenance, around access, around digital rights and managing those. And so there's just this entire world of possibility that opens before us by being the backbone of data communications in the world.
Wow, my mind is like, you said 6G and all that stuff. I was like, whoa, that's true.
Who wins buzzword bingo today?
Oh my God. That's really, really amazing. I'm just really excited by all the work that you and Virgil Systems is doing. And so please let us know how we can help. The community here is also here to help. So what's the best way they can learn more about you or keep in touch?
Really the best way, go to virgilsystems.com, learn more about our business. If you want to get in touch with me, you can feel free to email yvorona@virgilsystems.com. Would love to hear from you. We are growing our team aggressively right now. We've got some phenomenal candidates who are filling positions in software development, in data engineering, in network engineering. So we're growing rapidly, and we're really excited about what the world holds ahead of us. And so we're keen to develop partnerships, especially within the telecommunications industry, and with large enterprises that are concerned with the quality of the data that they are receiving.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, hopefully this was as interesting for you as it was for me. I learned so much. Definitely check out virgilsystems.com. And don't forget to register for the UNconference coming up on October 14th from 9 to 1:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. Bye, everybody.